The end of my sadness. Chapter 1. The quiet descent. Sadness had always been a quiet companion, creeping in when least expected, slowly, tugging at the corners of my mind. It didn't feel like an overwhelming storm at first. No, it was more like a fog, rolling in softly, wrapping itself around my thoughts until I couldn't see anything else. At first, I didn't realize what was happening. I had everything I needed: a job, friends, family, and moments of joy scattered here and there. But something in my chest began to feel heavy. There were days when I woke up, and the weight of the world felt more like a burden than a challenge. Thoughts would swirl in my head, and no matter how I tried to push them away, they stayed. I couldn't pinpoint why I felt this way. There was no singular event to blame. The sadness didn't come from one tragic thing. It was more of 1,000 small cuts that never healed. The nagging voice inside my mind told me I wasn't enough, that I was failing at this thing called life. The expectations of others and the pressure I placed on myself collided, and all I could do was sit quietly, drowning in my own thoughts, wishing I could disappear. Chapter 2. Searching for answers. In the depth of my sadness, I began to search for answers. I tried everything that was supposed to make me feel better: talking to friends, reading self-help books, even venturing into mindfulness and meditation, but each attempt only seemed to mask the sadness temporarily. Like a leaky bucket, the pain kept seeping back in. I started to question why I couldn't simply snap out of it. Why was it so hard to find peace? Why was sadness so heavy? Sometimes I would lose myself in thoughts that made me wonder if I was broken beyond repair. Other days, the sadness felt like a permanent fixture in my life, something that had always been there and would always be there. But then something changed. I realized that I had been looking for an external solution. I was searching for the one thing that would fix everything. What I had failed to realize was that the answer wasn't out there. It was within me. I began reflecting on my life, the choices I had made, the relationships I had built, and the dreams I had chased. I allowed myself to acknowledge the wounds, the failures, and the regrets, but I also saw the strength I had gained through them. Each scar I had collected along the way was proof of my resilience. Chapter 3. Embracing the darkness. I had always tried to push away sadness, to make it disappear. But what if I could simply sit with it? What if I allowed myself to feel the full extent of it, to experience it fully? In embracing the darkness, I slowly began to understand that my sadness wasn't a thing to be defeated or avoided. It was a part of me. It was a chapter in my life, one that would eventually close, but not without a lesson. I learned that sadness, in all its forms, is not the enemy. It is the catalyst for growth, the force that forces you to look inward and discover your strength. I started to appreciate the sadness for what it was: not something to be fixed, but something to be understood and integrated into my life. Chapter 4. Small moments of peace. The more I allowed myself to sit with my sadness, the more I started to find small moments of peace. It wasn't instant, and it wasn't permanent, but it was there. A quiet morning where the sun bathed everything in soft light, a cup of tea shared with a friend, a simple walk in nature. These moments began to remind me that life still had beauty, even amidst the pain. I started to realize that life wasn't about avoiding sadness, but learning to live with it. The key wasn't in eradicating pain, but in allowing space for joy to coexist with sorrow. Chapter 5. The Gift of Reflection. As I spent more time reflecting on my journey, I came to understand that my sadness had been a teacher. It had taught me about my capacity for endurance, about the value of vulnerability, and about the strength that comes from simply surviving. It also taught me about acceptance. I could no longer try to force myself to be happy or expect life to always feel light and easy. I had to embrace the ebb and flow of emotions, knowing that sadness would come and go, just as joy and peace would. In this reflection, I saw my own transformation. I wasn't the same person I had been when the sadness first appeared. I had grown. I had learned that true peace comes from within, from understanding, acceptance, and self-compassion. Chapter 6. Rebuilding from Within. The sadness had cracked me open, but it also created space for something new to grow. I began to rebuild myself from within. I didn't need to be fixed, I simply needed to heal. And healing wasn't a quick process. It took time, effort, and patience. I began to care for myself in ways I hadn't before, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. I practiced setting boundaries, asking for help when I needed it, and learning to speak kindly to myself. I surrounded myself with people who supported me, and I distanced myself from things and situations that triggered my pain. Slowly but surely, I began to find a sense of stability, a balance that was long overdue. Chapter 7. The Breaking of the Clouds. One day, without realizing it, the clouds began to break. The heaviness in my chest lifted, little by little. It didn't happen in an instant. It was a slow, gentle transformation, one that I hadn't fully noticed until I looked back. I had found a way to live with my sadness, and by doing so, it no longer had power over me. It had lost its hold, and in its place, I felt something new. Freedom. I could now look at my life with clearer eyes, not defined by my sadness, but by the strength I had discovered in the process of overcoming it. Chapter 8. The End of Sadness. The day came when I realized that my sadness had come to an end. It wasn't that I would never feel sad again. I knew that life was full of ups and downs, but the sadness I had carried for so long, the sadness that had shaped so much of who I was, had finally dissipated. I was no longer consumed by it. It no longer dictated my actions, my choices, or my thoughts. I had learned to walk through life with a quiet peace, knowing that even in the hardest moments, I had the ability to endure. The sadness wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I was free to embrace all the emotions life had to offer, knowing that I was strong enough to navigate them. And so, the chapter of sadness ended, not with a grand moment of victory, but with a quiet understanding that peace had found its place in my heart, and with it, the end of my sadness. Epilogue. The journey continues. Life, of course, never truly stops. There will be new challenges, new emotions, and new lessons to learn, but I no longer fear the sadness when it arrives. I know it will come, and I know I will face it with grace and understanding, because now I understand the truth that Sadness is not the enemy, but a companion on the journey of life. And in embracing it, I have found the strength to walk through the storms, knowing that the sun will always rise again. This story traces the inner transformation from sadness to peace, offering hope and showing that healing is a gradual, ongoing process. Every chapter signifies a step toward self-awareness, acceptance, and the realization that sadness doesn't define us, it's just a part of the larger picture of life. The end.